senior leaders expect HR to go and do that, right? HR leaders can't do that themselves, right? It has to be the leaders who have to do that.
So everyone has to wear the HR hat at that point of time.
Yeah, right. They have to wear the people hat, right?
Yeah.
I mean, end of the day, it's all about people. Secondly, I think most importantly, and from there, it is really about building champions within the team, right?
Yeah.
It has to be people from the ground level who have to kind of come in together to build that, right? And I think third most important aspect of change is of course about communication. There can never be over communication when there's a change happening.
Business environment is changing. People aspirations are also changing very fast. New generation Z is coming. And again, change is very much required because in my understanding, you can't do today's work with yesterday's method and be in business tomorrow.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Ankita.
Pleasure.
Welcome, of course, to our Rethink HR session here in Delhi. I'm really honored to be moderating this session here with on a relevant topic, I would say, management design and change management, imperative to organizational goals. We have an esteemed panelist members here, and we've just seen their introduction. So coming to the topic, before we go into the Q&A session and we hear from you, just a context, constantly adapting to a dynamic business environment has been the name of the game always, and more so even today. Because organizations today, more than ever before, need to be agile and adaptable. We've just heard two very effective speakers, okay, Mr. Anupam and Mr. Ashutosh. And everything around what they're saying is about the environment and how things have changed, and change being so constant that we have to be agile, we have to look at new ways to be relevant in today's time and age. So I am sure you will agree with me that management design, the first part of our topic, helps to create structures, processes, and systems that enable organizations to respond effectively to changes. However, change management, which is the other important part of our topic today, provides a systematic approach to managing the transition from current state to the desired state, thus ensuring that organizational changes are implemented smoothly and effectively. So with that context, Ashutosh, I would like to ask you, what does management design and change management in the context of the past few years, and we know what all has happened over the past few years, how does management design and change management, and what does it mean to you in the context of the past few years?
Yeah, thanks for asking this question. I think the change management was there in every time, but now it is very fast. So you don't know what will happen tomorrow. Right. And pandemic is one of the very great example of this. Same thing, the change can happen or required in any organization also, because business environment is changing. People aspirations are also changing very fast. New generation Z is coming. And again, change is very much required, because in my understanding, you can't do today's work with yesterday's method and be in business tomorrow.
Correct.
So if we want to be in the business tomorrow, we have to agile and flexible. And for that changing process, we need to have a model, but that model cannot be adopted by each organization. Same model, same mistake cannot be there for every organization. We need to understand what exactly our needs are, and accordingly we have to plan our model.
So what you're saying is one size doesn't really fit all.
It doesn't fit all.
Yeah, what used to work in the past, it doesn't really work going forward.
That's true. And it will depend on the organization to organization.
Yeah.
And each individuals are different. So you may require sometime a different change model for a different group of people.
Correct.
Gen Z will require different kind of change model. Our generation will require different kind of model. So that kind of understanding or flexibility should be there in the organization to adapt to the changes.
Right. And we know that lot has happened in the last few years. Do you think we are any more in a position, and as an HR leader, do you think we are any more in a position to be able to anticipate what are those changes we would be facing in the coming few years? Or like we've been taken by surprise, in the last few years, we have to just respond.
Again, we talked about the flexibility in the culture. That is important. So you don't understand what will be there tomorrow. The challenges are different. Nobody had expected that COVID will stop whole world.
Yeah.
Same way, suppose if internet goes wrong, what happens? We are not ready for that.
Correct.
Everything has changed from the manual to digital. What happens if internet is not there? There may be several changes or several future difficulties may come to us, and we need to be ready for that. So main important thing for us to be ready for those changes, and sometime the customer market is also changing a lot. So earlier the companies were selling the product what they were selling, but now you have to understand what customer requires. Maybe sometimes you need to support the customer, what exactly, how the market is changing and why you will be requiring a change.
Correct.
And I was just reading one of the article from the McKinsey, which says that around 52% of the companies are out of Fortune 500 list in last 20 years. Why? Because either they have been merged, acquired, or vanished. The reason could be this.
That's a big change. Yeah, thanks for sharing that statistics. It puts things into context for sure. Yeah. So, thank you, Ashutosh. So, coming to you, Harpreet, do you believe that change management is a trait that business leaders should look to build in not just their HR leaders, but also just overall leadership to deal with these unforeseen circumstances? Do you think we need to focus on building this as a trait?
Yeah, I mean, change management as we talk about it, I think, I think it's a very basic requirement of our personal and professional lives, right? So, if you look around your ecosystem, whether professionally or personally, you'll always have a set of people who are, when you throw an idea at them, the first reaction that you see from them is no, right? And there are always other set of people who, the minute you throw an idea at them, they're very excited about it and say, oh yeah, let's explore, right? So there are always different type of people, whether in our personal or professional lives, right? And so as leaders, as HR leaders and as business leaders, I think what we really need to create is to figure out what is the change that's required, right? Typically in most organizations when they're driving a big change, specifically in HR, there's always something called change champions that you kind of have, right? Just dwelling into a past experience, when I was in American Express, we were driving this huge M&A kind of a project that was there. And the one learning that I had out of it was that, when you're driving a huge change, if you talk about processes, if you talk about systems, all these are tech and non-humane things. The biggest change that has to be driven is for the people and about the people, right? Because everything we were able to do very, very peacefully and very well structured as per the SOPs that were laid. But I think the biggest challenge and the most interesting part of that whole project was how are we going to drive change for the group of about 1,500 people that we had made, because it was a huge change and a huge shift that were being made. They were being moved from an organization with which they were there for 20 years into an organization which they were probably not prepared for, right? Right. And I think that to me, it was the biggest learning when we kind of saw. And some of the things that helped, that during that piece was around, of course, who is leading the change, right? So, of course, the HR leaders and the business leaders have to lead that change from the front. A lot of my HR friends will agree with me that, when the time goes tough, a lot of organization senior leaders expect HR to go and do that, right? HR leaders can't do that themselves, right? It has to be the leaders who have to do that.
So everyone has to wear the HR hat at that point of time.
Yeah, all right. They have to wear the people hat, right?
Yeah.
I mean, end of the day, it's all about people. Secondly, I think most importantly, and from there, it is really about about building champions within the team, right?
Yeah.
It has to be people from the ground level who have to kind of come in together to build that, right? And I think third most important aspect of change is of course about communication. There can never be over communication when there's a change happening, right? We've experienced that when there was COVID times. We experienced, in anything that has been happening in the past, that communication is the key. And being authentic and just being true to people is important, because it's okay for me as an HR leader to stand up and say, sorry, I don't know the answer for this. I don't know about it today. Maybe in 10 days time, I will know what this change is going to be. Are we going to change this policy? Are we going to bring something different? So I think those are certain aspects that are there. So I think as HR leaders, as business leaders, change is very, very fundamental trait for any successful business, I feel. And you will have certain set of people who kind of take it to fish as, very, very naturally, and they kind of adapt very well. And there will be other set of people who are not so open to it. And how you drive that change, how you build that change, how you, systematically plan for it is really the whole essence on how effective that change is going to be.
Yeah, so what is, from what you're saying, what I'm hearing in a nutshell is that it's very crucial. So I think HR, the leaders play a very crucial role in engaging and motivating employees to this change, because managing people, because they are the ones who are going to actually drive that change. Each individual has to accept, adapt, and then move forward to be in that future state. And it's the people who have to move from one point A to point B. So keeping them engaged, motivating them, and then, helping them transition. That's what's important, right, through this. Thank you so much, Harpreet. It is believed that change as a part of company culture refers to the acceptance and embracing of change as a fundamental value and mindset within an organization. Okay, so it's a value, it's a mindset. Charlene, next question is for you. So what, according to you, are the enabling factors to fostering a culture of change? Because change happens, but having that, in the culture, so everybody is kind of behaving the same manner. What are those enabling factors to fostering a culture of change?
Look, thanks Namrata. So good morning everyone. As we know that changes are inevitable in businesses today. What we have seen in the last 2 to 3 years, especially after pandemic, right? You cannot define that what is working well for you today would work well for you tomorrow also. I think we are living in a very dynamic environment, and people who are not adaptive or embrace change will vanish soon. Similarly, businesses also. So it is a full value chain also. It starts from businesses to middle management to the team members also. And I'm sure the generative AI, all the technologies that are coming now and going to be there, embracing change is going to be a big factor. In fact, I just share one of the reports being shared by Gartner that the average organizations have actually gone through 5 enterprise changes in the last 3 years after pandemic, and almost 73% of the organizations are going to have more change initiatives in the upcoming few years also. So look at the way how organizations are actually, whether they like to or don't like to, they have to go through these changes also. And then I'm coming back to your question, what is the major factors which fosters the agile culture, I would say, rather than culture of change also. The biggest factor which I feel is the agile leadership, because when you have the agile leadership, and it clearly states that separate the organization from a high performing to a low performing organization, and it is a trusted thing that if the organizations who are actually performing well, whether in terms of your profitability, your market share, and your growth, is actually how they have reported the agility part than the low performer. So that's how the leadership agility takes a biggest chunk of how you drive change in an organization also, because leadership are the role models. When they stand, communicate with the team member, they feel that this is the guy we have to look up to. This is the guy who's managing the entire business altogether. And when they talk about that we embrace new ideas, we embrace how you're going to really do a lot of risk-taking things in the organization, then actually everybody else who listen to them feels that if I make mistakes in this organization, it's okay, because my leader is saying this is fine if you take unrepented risk in the organization. So for me, the biggest factor that can really embrace positive change in the organization are the agile leadership. And another thing which I feel this is one of the biggest factor which can really drive positive change in the organization, whether it is process, productivity, people, or the strategies, is creating a sense of urgency. I'm not saying that creating a sense of urgency means you do things very fast. When you see changes has stemmed from maybe a demographic shift, maybe today there are government regulation, there are competition which is changing, and there are many factors around. So it is important that we also create a sense of urgency in the people. Because if you see, people don't fear change, people fear sudden change. And I think that's the difficult thing in the organization, because organization try to bring certain changes, and that is very, very disheartening for the team. So what this sense of urgency would create is that when you know what is coming to you in future, you try and take baby steps towards in that direction. And when you are gearing up for that, which means that you will not allow to people have sudden shocks. And then they will also start embracing those change also. So that is the second factor which I feel really helps organization to transform into cultural changes, or the change culture of change. Third, as you also mentioned and you also mentioned, is in terms of communication. I think this is the biggest thing. If the leaders or the people who are the senior stakeholders, when they stand and talk very, very honestly about the changes, right? I am sure, and the background also, people understand. I'll give you an example towards the pandemic time. And I will not take the name of the organization, but I'm sure it was there all in the newspaper as well. Organizations talked about that since, because it's a difficult times, they are not going to pay full salaries to their employees. And what they have done their town halls, they talked about how difficult the situation is. And trust me, when the organization, people have heard about all this, they did not leave those organizations. They said that yes, the organization is going through a tough time. Our leader is saying things is going to be back on track. Stay with us. And we have seen that people have happily taken those salary cuts also and moved with the organization. And when the times come back, when the economy recovered, everything fall in place. So it all depends on communication and the honesty of the leadership team and the senior stakeholders in terms of giving those inputs to the team. So communication plays a big role. Now, another aspect of in terms of top-down communication. Similarly, in terms of communication from bottom up, which means that am I encouraged to give ideas? Am I encouraged to take risk also? Am I encouraged to really talk to people also and talk about my growth? All that also comes. So communication is not only from top to bottom, it also need to be up to down, from bottom to up as well. And the fourth piece, which I also feel is very, very important, as you mentioned about identifying the change champions also. Because if you see, the model of change says that you define and plan. But there is another basket of it, of a change model, which says that implement and sustain. If you identify the right set of champions in the organization, I'm sure those two factors also you can really work it out well, which is implementation and sustain. Because not every single person in the organization is well connected with the leaders also. And the leaders would not have time to really go to the last leg to really see how things are moving on the daily basis. So these change agents plays a very crucial role in terms of implementation and sustaining that, because those are the closer to the people who are there on the bottom of the pyramid as well. So for me, these are the four factors. But if you see, as Ashutosh also mentioned about it, learning and development is very, very important, because today, unless you are ready to upskill yourself, reskill yourself, you will not be able to really take on the bigger roles also, because there are less number of people there, and there are obviously companies are coming up with the new positions as well. And you should also embrace the way you embrace success also, it is also the company should embrace failures also, because it can give you an opportunity to experiment and build resilience in the organization, because they are not afraid of it. So, and many organizations also kept this as a part of their innovation labs also. Even if you fail and it is unrepented risk, it's okay with them. So for me, Namrata, these are the very, very crucial factor, and you can put these factor into any industry altogether also, it would really work well.
Thank you so much, Shaleen. I think you've taken...
I would like to add one
Yes,
thing. What
for
he was,
sure.
of course, the sudden change is not required, but what really want in the organization is we need to be better than yesterday.
Yeah.
Always that kind of culture is there, should be there, or we need to have growth mindset. Always we want to see how we can grow further. That kind of culture will always help the change.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. So, I think that was very elaborate, and I think very important points you mentioned in terms of, both of you, what could be enabling, helping organizations, move through that change. So people play a very important part, right? Because the change happens in people's hearts and minds, right? However, data is also very other important part of what we do today. And there is a section of people that feel that a data-driven approach to change management is making change management less humane. I would actually like to open up this question to the audience. Anybody would like to share their thoughts on what do they think about this? Do you think data-driven approach to change management is making change management less humane? Anyone would like to share their thoughts from the audience? Sure. Can we have a mic here, please?
Hi, I'm Neha Agarwal from Hitachi. I don't think that data is a hindrance to the change management or making it less human in any manner. In fact, data-driven approach is always a more efficient approach, and it's an enabler to infuse the change efficiently and effectively. So, for example, if you are launching a new policy or a procedure or a change in policy or procedure, and if you have enough data to support that these percentage of people are ready to accept it, or they are happy with this kind of change, or they vouch for it, definitely you owe that stance to put it forward to the management and get those approvals necessary, and then talk about it during your various communication at town halls, in emailers, in messages, and then it is very easy to get it adapted by the people. So data is definitely something that will help organization to put the change at place in best possible manner.
Very well said. I think I completely agree with that personally. Anyone else has a different view on this? Yeah.
Yeah, I am Colonel Rajneesh Handa. I come from the healthcare industry.
Hello.
I do agree that data is good, but extensive collation of data at times becomes paralysis takes place.
Sure.
And I've seen that in healthcare, like if you try to, like I'm saying, data is applicable in specific industries in a specific manner. In healthcare, if I speak in my industry, healthcare, if you do too much of analysis of data and you try to implement that on ground, it becomes a hindrance. Example, if I tell you that, okay, the time taken for a doctor to see, and analyze how many patients he's seeing in a given set of time, and you want to increase the productivity, and we say the ROI on the pay that we give the doctor, then you start trying to segment that amount of time for the doctor to see every patient. It doesn't work because it's personalized care.
Yeah.
So here, when we look at the data and we try to, you at the end of the month, you look at the stats and you see the amount of, patients he's seen, the amount of revenue is generated. It doesn't work.
Right.
So it is the outcome that matters in healthcare.
Sure.
The result that a doctor delivers, it matters, and that gets him the flow. So data is okay to a certain extent. Extensive use of data creates an imbalance.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think like
Thank
any
you.
other thing, any excessive of anything is not really good, but it's absolutely essential, like you said. Thank you so much. I think we have one more response, and then we'll, there, behind.
Amrita Punyani from Gartner. Of course, data-driven, anything that's data-driven helps us back our hypothesis it supports our hypothesis, so it's good to have. But I think when we talk about data in an organization, it depends what kind of data are we collecting. Is it employee data? Are employees aware about the data that's being collected? Is there an employee bill of rights within your organization? Are there particular use cases for which that data is being collected? I think these are some questions that are being talked about in the wider industry, and we should take care of that. So that's what I thought on this subject. But I do have a question regarding, Namrata, the last topic we were discussing, when we were talking about agile leadership, as Charlene was talking, or as Harpreet was talking about, that HR and business leaders, they need to take their decisions together.
Sure.
I wanted to know so this question goes to both Harpreet and Charlene. When we are talking about, HR leaders collaborating with business leaders, many of our surveys suggest that leadership buy-in is the #1 challenge when new strategies are being proposed. So how do you go about convincing leadership about the change management strategies you're proposing? Do you want to share any tips and tricks from real-life situations that you have been in? Any examples that you would like to share?
Sure. Yeah, thanks. Look, it's always difficult to really share your business cases with the leadership team. I completely agree. But it all depends on how prepared are you and how convinced as a HR leader, which will enable the growth perspective in the organization. When I see CEOs, because every single day we talk to the managing directors and the board members also, at the end of the day, they all believe in how your interventions, your initiatives really help organization grow, and in the times like this. I'll give you an example which we have recently shared with our leadership team members, and we have also got a lot of, I would say, back push, but since we were very, very assured about what we were planning to do for our employees, and eventually we got succeeded. Look, we have a separate LMS which is there, and we have a separate set of systems which talks about everything else also, whether it is a payroll or your succession planning tools, your collab tools and all that. Now, as an HR, because now organizations, we have very lean HR teams also, and one fine day you will find that a single set of person is doing so many things together. So we said that we will have a comprehensive system, which we will buy only one system which will have everything put together, and that was obviously an additional tool because we have bought everything else separately on that. But when we brought out the ideology in terms of how much saving it is going to give it to us put together, and we have shared the presentations, and we have also asked the vendors also to compare all the existing tools and methodologies that we are using, and basis what we are going to buy it, how much cost saving it is going to give it to the organization, and how much, since we are a sales organization, right, almost 700 people who are there in the regional offices, and we do not have actual offices, we work remotely and virtually also. So their tools and system really supporting the sales organization. So when we have proposed that, we know that this is kind of a push that we are going to get it back from the management. It all actually boils down to taking over that tool also. So I refrain right now taking the name of that tool because obviously we are just about to close that commercial, but it is going to work out. So in the nutshell from my side, what I like to say that generally HR tries to propose many things to the leadership team, but two things you need to really make sure that, one, how it is going to give my organization the thrust to move on, looking at the way maybe the technology, the ecosystem is going ahead, and also how it is going to support people with the ease of doing things. When you marry these two things together, trust me, most of your business cases will get through. The way HR started doing work is that when they have KPIs, they put their plans for the year, they put 10,000 initiatives in front of the management and say, we are going to do this, that. I would say pick up 3-4 big ticket items for the year, but do it seamlessly. And obviously those two results that I have shared with you, I'm sure leadership team will definitely support you always. We try to do too many things together, and that's why we fall back.
Thank you so much, Shaleen. And I think that's very good insights. So coming back to a point on data-driven approach, Harpreet, what do you think a data-driven approach to change management involves?
Yeah, so I think we've kind of talked about it a lot to say, I mean, there's no two ways to say at any point of time if you're driving some change and you have a data to back it up, that really makes sense, right? And obviously it kind of starts with the classic, 5-step, 6 steps approach of saying you collect the data, you analyze the data, you go back to a set of people with a kind of hypothesis to say, okay, this is what we are trying to do.
Yeah.
And then obviously kind of keep re-looking at it, right? Because it's not like once you put something in place, but either it's a policy or a practice that you can't kind of keep change, yeah? I recall in my early days in GE, there was a senior HR leader who said anything to do with people practices, it's an art and a science, right? It's a balance of an art and a science, right? So there has to be a lot of science in it because you have to have a fairly structured approach to how you're doing, but it has to be an art, right? And when you say art, you could say, okay, the human aspect of it, any policy that you put in place, it always says any exception to be approved by the CHRO, right? And I think that's what it is all about, right? Because every time, while 95% of the time that policy will work, there will be 5% time when things will be different, right? So it has to be an extremely, what I say, a structured approach of again, taking a few examples, if I was to talk about my current organization where we are probably the only ones in the organization doing a product which is called mortgage guarantee, right, mortgage insurance, right? And here what we're trying to do is essentially help people buy homes early, right? It's all about that. Now, being in a market where the product was, it's a very well-established product in US, Canada, some of these markets, and it was kind of brought into India, but it was brought into a very different shape and size. So the investor or the shareholder wanted everything to be structured the way we had it in the US, right? But I think in the last 6 years, I recall going to my board, so to speak, with my sales leader to say how my organizational structure or my sales structure is going to be very different from what probably we had put in our initial plans for the kind of people that I need to hire or the kind of budgets that I need are very, very different because this is what my data says. Or when we started out, we said, okay, the set of people who are going to make sense for us are people who come in from mortgage insurance, mortgage background, people who understand home loans. But I think over a period of 2 years, we realized, and that's what data helped us look at it, to say people who come with an insurance mindset are people who are going to be the frontline best guys to work for us, right? So I think it always helps, when you have data, it always helps you to have a conversation to put a business case across. But like I said, it's always a balance. And to someone who asked that question there, I think as HR leaders, there's no one way, right? There's no,
yeah.
And I'd say not only HR leaders, as business leaders, every day I think you have to keep making changes. You have to keep understanding. You have to keep adapting, right? There are times when the business has to be given precedence over it, right? While we talk about COVID, we talk about how people work from home, but you look at industries like financial sector, like healthcare, people were still out there, right? We had to ask our people to be there because the so-called essential services where the tech industry could sit at home, right? So how do you manage that, right? So I think it's an everyday piece about saying how are you going to move forward. But yeah, data helps. But like I said, it's a balance. It's an art and the science and how you kind of keep balancing it.
Some excellent examples you've given us to show us how data will actually help us maneuver through managing the business and making course corrections if required, right? Where you first, you had a different set of people coming for your mortgage product, and then you said insurances are going to be the front benchers. I think that's a very good example. Helps us understand that better. So from data, talking about the humanized change part of it, okay, humanized change management refers to an organizational change approach that prioritizes the needs, well-being and involvement of employees throughout the change process. We've spoken about that, right? It recognizes that employees are at the heart of an organization and that their support, engagement and emotional well-being are critical for a successful change implementation. So Ashutosh, if I come to you, what in your opinion are the key elements of humanized change? We've spoken about data backing, any change related to people. But what according to you, in your opinion, are the key elements of humanized change?
So again, I think all of us have talked about the communication. Communication is one of the key, because through communication, we can coordinate and collaborate. Collaboration is very much important in any change management. We need to be the part of that. As in management, as an HR, or as a business manager, we need to be the part of that change. So collaboration is one of the very important. Communication is the things, and through communication you can develop the collaboration. But at the same time, I feel that empathy is very important.
Empathy, yeah.
Because till I am not going into the shoes of any individual, I will not understand exactly how they are feeling.
Correct.
So that is the very important part, empathy and trust. That is very important.
Very well said.
For me, it is 9, but for you, it could be a 6. So we need to understand why you are saying 6, why I am saying 9.
Right.
So that is very important. Another thing, whenever humanized change process is there, I think recognition of any persons, like we talked about the change champions.
Absolutely.
We need to recognize those change champions, because they are helping organizations to grow.
Yeah.
They are helping organization to change. These are the, I think 2-3 topics are the very, very important: empathy, communication, collaborations, trust and recognition.
Recognition and celebrating. People
Of
who
course,
have
we need to
enabled,
celebrate.
who have been the enablers of that change.
Yeah, we need to celebrate together.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
So as not giving a fault only, we need to celebrate also.
Anything else you all would like to add to this piece?
No, completely agree. I think empathy is very, very important, and whatever the organizations and team members have gone through in the last 2 to 3 years, I think this is one of the key words. And in fact, the organizations who are very cutthroat earlier also, what they have also seen it in their organization, they've started empathizing with people also. So this is going to continue further on, and I would say that organizations become more humanized these days. Otherwise, we have seen organizations who are very cutthroat, who really feels that we are here for performing, having productivity, and if we are not performing, we are just out. So right now the organization is in a mood that if you are not even performing, okay, what I can do for you so that I can reshape you and you can put in some other role where you can perform.
Right.
So I think the good part about that, the human resource in the organization has taken a further step ahead in terms of partnering with business and become a very strong member in terms of giving direction to the organization. So completely agree with your thoughts.
Thank you. So from a Q&A perspective, and then we'll go to the audience for any questions they have. So we heard, earlier we heard Ashutosh Ashutosh from LinkedIn speak about the 4 forces of change. He spoke about cultural, economic, generational and technological. And we've seen a lot of change in the last couple of years, 2-3 years I would say. And kind of, I think in all our lifetimes, we've had one of a kind crisis, which was also mentioned. And we are living through history, we are all part of history. So in that context, everything in our reference point today when you talk to anyone is pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, pre-pandemic. It's like as if life before COVID and life after COVID. That seems to be kind of the benchmark here.
Yeah.
So if I come back to you, Shalini, and please feel free, Harpreet and Ashutosh, to add to that. In the post-pandemic era, what according to you are the top 3, it could be top 2, top 3, top 5. So what according to you are the top 3 management design and change management principles for HR heads, and have they changed vis-a-vis before the pandemic?
So I would say for me, adoption and resilience have become a key principle in doing everything that you do, because organizations started taking more risk because they embracing change, and obviously when you start embracing change also, not every change will have a positive impact in the organization also. But the good part about that, organization started feeling that if the people have become more resilient to things, I'm sure that the same set of people will get success in the future change programs.
Sure.
So for me, that is very, very important also. The second aspect which I feel is that delivering more with less. This principle is absolutely universal, and you will find that post-pandemic also people have shrunk organizations, people have less, and they have embraced technology also.
Yeah.
So delivering less with technology is one principle. Even we have seen that the organizations who are not adapting and embracing technology environment has actually gone into that, and you have seen that when we get into such conferences also, there are huge set of organizations who are there, and they have adding day to day also, which means that people have started focusing on that. So for me, these two aspects are really critical, and whatever we have seen for down the line, at least for 5 to 7 years, it is going to take a next level of shape, and you will find more and more people. And I'm sure Ashutosh or maybe the other gentleman was talking about Gen Z, but I'm talking about Gen Alpha also. By 2030, there will be a set of Gen Alpha who is going to be part of the working community. And I'm sure, and we have seen in our houses also, these guys are being born with technology spoons, right? So if you do not really serve them anything which is related to technology, they are not going to work that. So, and I feel that this is going to even go further. So for me, resilience and how we're going to deliver more with using technology as a platform are the two biggest principle which is going to continue and shape up the future of the organizations in India, and also the people also who are working in those organizations.
Thank you, Shalini. Harpreet, you want to add to this?
Not really principles, but I think, when we talk about change management, like rightly pointed out, I think the Gen Zs and the folks going ahead, they in my mind, they are the champions of change, right? Because they've seen the most, right? I can see, I have a young son who can multitask with so much ease versus someone like me. I mean, I sometimes question saying, how can you do this and this and this together? I've tested it and now I've learned to keep quiet about it, right? So I think the Gen X and the Y probably need to learn a little bit more about change management versus those folks, because I think they've just seen that and they're so adaptive to it, right? And just again sharing an example, I think about 2 years back, again, my son showed me a project that he was doing, working in college, and how he could just write a report by putting something somewhere, right? And obviously 2 years back, honestly, I didn't, 18 months back, I wasn't so up to speed when it comes to ChatGPT. And I'm like a mother and like an HR professional, I say, oh, this is integrity violation, how can you just pull it up like this, etc., etc. And I think about a week back, I sent him a LinkedIn forward, and he sent me back saying, Mother, it took you 18 months to walk that road, right? And I think that was just a reflection back on me as a mother and as a professional to say, the next generation is very, very used to walking and changing things very quickly. I think they understand a lot of that versus us. Because I think we've done a lot of great work and we built a lot of strong pieces, but how we quickly going to adapt some of this, HR policies, HR practices. In organizations, are we going to give tools free to people where they can use this? Are we okay with people using AI generated tools in their day-to-day functioning?
Right.
I think those are some of the questions which a lot of HR folks and senior business leaders are going to get thrown back on. Because there's a tech sector and there's a lot of other tech-enabled sectors, like especially financial sector, which I work come from, and a lot of those pieces come in. So I think in my mind, that's really, the principles of the fundamentals are going to be different, right? And I think how each one of us really look at some of these things is
very nice. I like the examples you're giving us. So these, analogies are actually helping us understand how, and the point you made right at the start of the session, that one of the things that we are dealing with is different generations. And so how people think and behave and how they conduct their day-to-day business, even when you belong to different generations, determines how they will accept change and how they will adopt to change. So yeah, there's a lot of learning from the cross generations also. Thank you so much, Harpreet. And Ashutosh, anything
Yes,
you
so
would like
for
to add
me,
to
I
this?
think I completely agree with the adaptability and the technology. These are the two very important. But at the same time, personally, I feel that how to handle failure or how to have a plan B, it should always be there. And this should be a model in the change. Because if you are changing something, it is not sure that you will get the output as you are thinking. So we need always a plan B mindset. And I think Ashutosh talked about that in that plan B.
Yes. Thank you very much. And it's been my privilege to be able to moderate this session. Thank you very much. As we maneuver ourselves through this crazy world, I wouldn't say VUCA world, Barney world, or give it any acronyms. It is a crazy world, so we're all living in it. And like I said, every event that happens and all the change management we manage is making us part of history. In future, people will talk about us saying, this is a historical event, and you know what? We would have all been part of it. So make the best of it. Thank you very much, and I've really enjoyed this session.